seconds, okay?
Okay, perfect.
All right, thank you. All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and in some cases, good morning where I am. Welcome to Eyes at the Last Mile, Ethical Impact Storytelling for Environmental Peace Building. Before we dive in, I wanted to take just a few moments to share some context on the broader initiative this event is part of. In June 2026, the Environmental Peacebuilding Association will host our fourth international conference in Ottawa, Canada. In the lead up to that conference, Environmental Peacebuilding Association, NPACS, we launched the Path to Ottawa, a global consultative series of events and initiatives designed to engage diverse communities on environmental peace building issues relevant to their own contexts and regions. And today's event, organized by Faith Mutegi, is one of those initiatives and a particularly meaningful one at that. Faith is one of the Environmental Peacebuilding Association's environmental peacebuilding champions ahead of the upcoming conference. And our Environmental Peacebuilding Champion program brings together 23 advocates from around the world, selected from among the contributors to an exciting new publication, Essential Concepts of Environmental Peacebuilding, an A to Z guide. So perhaps you can put the slide up now.
Will do.
That's not the right slide. No, it's just there. It's yeah, it looks like the fourth slide. Keep going.
Sorry, it wouldn't let me unmute. This is it this slide?
No, keep going. Keep going.
It's
I
slide
don't know
number
what
21.
happened.
21.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there we go. No, previous one, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, oh, that's actually not it. Oh, that is it. Okay. Yes. So sorry for this technical. This is a problem because I can't get my camera to work on my laptop. So that's the issue. Um, the environmental program brings together 23 advocates from around the world, as I said, and they're selected among contributors to our new publication, Essential Concepts of Environmental Peace Building. And I'll have something to say a bit about that later. It's an A to Z guide. It's the first comprehensive reference work of its kind. There's 185 entries covering the key concepts, frameworks, institutions that define our field, contributed by 229 experts spanning academia, policy, practice, civil society, and the terms themselves have been translated into 10 languages, not the entire definition, but just the terms. And it'll be open access in late June 2026. So if you go to the Rutledge link at the bottom there, we'll share these slides. But if you go to that link at the bottom, you will, sorry, you will find the book, but don't buy it. Wait till wait till it's open access, and that will be much better. The whole point is to have it open and available to everybody around the world. So each champion is hosting an event in their community ahead of the upcoming conference in Ottawa. I've got the conference listed on the right-hand side. You can see it there. And if you're interested, we do have a virtual day that's free on June 9th. And if you just tag that QR code there, you'll be able to register for that, or join us in Ottawa if you like. Um, so Faith's event today exemplifies exactly what this program is about, bringing environmental peace building to life in ways that are grounded in dialogue and community-centered storytelling. So what is a definition anyway, but a story of some kind? So with that, I'll hand things over. Welcome again, everyone, and I hope today's session is as thought-provoking and engaging for you as I know it will be. So thanks very much, and Faith, over to you.
Thank you so much, Prof. I promise I am going to give you a proper introduction later when you're sharing your remarks. I have not
Okay.
introduced you yet. So, Eva, we will go back to the beginning as I introduce our first speaker, Dr. Paul Kibati. I hope, Doc, you're here. So Dr. Paul Kibati is one of my colleagues, and he's a public health expert at Amrefel Africa, working at the intersection of climate change, conflict, and neglected tropical diseases in fragile settings. His work on visceral leishmaniasis demands ethical rigor where data, numbers, and stories are gathered amid insecurity and deep community vulnerability. Today, he reflects on how evidence can be built without extraction and how storytelling can protect dignity while still driving justice in action. Welcome, Doc. Are you here? If you're here, please unmute as I ask you your question for the day. So Doc was in the field, so I know he might be having technical issues when it comes to network. So maybe we can hold as we wait for him to join. And I'll go ahead and pick a speaker who's already here to start for us. So, Dr. Mrife, I'm sorry, I'm going to ambush you in this, but what you're about to share is closely related to Dr. Kibati, so allow me to ambush you. So, Dr. Mrife, he grew up in Kwale County, one of the ASAL regions in Kenya, and now serves the same community where he grew up. He is a medical doctor. He has lived the story that many outsiders come to document climate stress, disease, and resilience long before it became a global talking point. Today, he speaks as both healer and community member on what ethical storytelling gets wrong, right, and how agency can be restored at the last mile. Welcome, Dr. Mohanje. You want to say hi before I ask you two questions?
Thank you, Faith. I'm honored to be here today. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Yes, greetings.
Hi.
Hello.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So my name is Jasper Mreve Mohanje, as my colleague and friend Faith has put it. And today I'm here to storytell, basically interact with everyone on this platform and share the content that we all have.
Awesome. Question one for you. You grew up in Kwale's dry environment and now practice medicine there. When outside researchers, journalists, or NGOs come to tell stories about climate change in your community, what is the most common way they get it wrong, and what would you want them to do differently?
All right. Thank you for that question, Faith. So one of the okay, before I answer that question, I'll just give a disclaimer that I am deeply rooted into this community. I've been born and raised here, so I didn't read this from a textbook. I'm part of the community, so I understand it to the roots. So to answer the question, one thing that people get it wrong here when it comes to climate change, basically, is uh, people fail to understand, or rather, NGOs and visitors who come around fail to understand that people around here, climate change, or rather, adverse climate change is a way of life. It's not, it's actually a way of life. It's not that they are doing whatever they are doing so that because they want to do it that way. It's actually their way of life. What am I saying? What I'm saying is, let me use an example. For example, everyone knows that it is good to have ground cover, let's say ground cover trees and forests around here. It's actually a good concept that everyone should be practicing. But you find that this community relies on destruction of forest, basically wood and the likes, so that they make livelihood out of it. So they are not doing it because they want to, but that is their way of life. So you find people come along, encourage people to promote ground cover, for example. I mean, plant more trees and whatnot, but they're not giving them practical solutions. If you are to stop cutting down trees, then what are you supposed to do so that you make a living? So in my community, I think people misunderstand the behaviors or practices that actually contribute to adverse climate change because it is actually their way of life. So in my opinion, how things should change, I think people should give alternatives to livelihoods other than telling them in quotes, textbook kind of material. They need practical solutions on how to stop the adverse climate behaviors and actually have alternative behaviors or I mean ideas on how to actually have their livelihoods without having adverse climate changes around them.
Thanks, Doc. I like when you say give practical solutions. Question number 2, and the last one at this juncture is you are a doctor, but you are also a community member. When you yourself tell stories about Kwale in conferences to policymakers or in writing, is there anything you would choose not to share because it will be harmful or extractive? And how do you make that decision?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of information that is usually not okay. It's information that I would like to share on different platforms, but the truth of the matter is, not all provided platforms are viable platforms to provide that kind of information. And this is what I mean. It's in my community, it's a hot political seat. By politics, I mean, give an example. I think it's best understood with an example. For example, in my field of operation, whereby it's in the medical field, you find the local government or the powers that be, so to say, they keep on mushrooming facilities, let's say dispensaries and low-level hospitals all around the community. Now, that might sound politically correct or politically powerful, but the problem is they're just structures, but they're not functional. They're just there politically, they have a lot of political mileage, but they don't really serve the community because they don't function as they're intended to function. They're just there as I don't know, white elephants or something like that. So that kind of information, you speak about it freely in many platforms, it might cause a lot of friction within the community. So that's part of the information that really I wish I could be freely speaking about it, but I find myself choosing the audience to share such kind of information. So it's quite challenging on how to decide when and when not to speak about it unless you have like-minded individuals who can understand you. Yeah.
Thanks, Doc. Totally agree with you. For anyone who will wish to understand this further, please make a trip to Kwale and it's all going to make sense. And we're lucky to have you here as our contact person. Thank you so much. And now I am going to take the call back to Dr. Kibati, who is here with us. Doc, we understand you might be in a place where you have difficulties with your network, but thank you so much. Feel free to to unmute as I read your introduction again. So Dr. Kibati is a public health expert at Amrefel Africa, working at the intersection of climate change, conflict, and neglected tropical diseases in fragile settings. His work on visceral leishmaniasis demands ethical rigor where data, numbers, and stories are gathered amid insecurity and deep community vulnerability. Today, he reflects on how evidence can be built without extraction and how storytelling can protect dignity while still driving justice and action. Welcome, Doc. Say hi before I ask your first question.
Thank you, Faith, and hi, everyone from wherever you join. Apologies for joining a bit late. Yes, I am in northern part of Kenya, a place called Mandera County, at the border of Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia. I'm happy to be here as well.
Thank you so much, Doc, and we are happy to have you here today. So your first question is, your work keeps showing the importance of numbers for impact. In a conflict-prone territory where data collection is dangerous and trust is fragile, how do we ethically gather the numbers without extracting from or endangering communities? Go ahead, Doc.
Thank you for that question, Faith. Let me just begin by sharing a small experience that I had a few months ago in one of the counties where we support work with visual leishmaniasis. It was about noon. We are in a health facility, and then walks in a pregnant lady with a young child. So we paid no much attention to that child at first. And the mother says, yeah, I brought my son. He's been having fevers for a long time. I'd like him looked at. And so the clinician takes the child, puts him on an examination couch, begin asking him a few questions in the local dialect, which I didn't understand. So I have to be translated for, and then eventually examines. And then it's like, this child needs a test for Kalaza. Let them go get a test and come back. So the child goes, gets a test, it's positive, come back. Once we tell the mother that we need to admit the child, she says, I understand about Kalaza. Actually, I myself was a patient here 6 months ago. And so I only brought my child today to get same treatment that I got 6 months ago. And so you already seen a pattern. Imagine this is a mother with a young child, 7 years old. And your first inquisition is to ask, okay, when were you here? How many children, other children do you have? Have you gotten this disease before? Who in your neighbor, the neighbor got this disease before, etc. But you understand that she's here for her child. And the first thing was to let the child receive care. In the process of that, she tells us, oh, by the way, I'm having now what we perceive as reduced fetal movements. So that's another surprise. Okay. We didn't even bother to ask the mother about her pregnancy. How long has it been? It's only during that encounter we found out that, oh, this is actually her first clinic visit during this particular pregnancy at about 6 months of pregnancy. And so it brings into question that whenever we are interacting with our communities, it's very important, first of all, to understand that they have reasons for what they have chosen to do. She came to the hospital first for her child, not because of her ANC. Not because of her clinic. She may have missed clinics earlier on in her pregnancy, but it's not for us to castigate her and make her feel like, why have you missed these clinics? Do you know the importance of getting early checkups and all these things? But she had to care for her children. She had other duties at home, and only when this child had to come for care did she have to bring her. Spending a lot of money, spending a very long distance. A trip cost about, I would say, $40 US. Let's say 5,000 Kenya shillings one way on a motorbike. In a country where a big chunk of the population lives on about $2 a day. And so you understand that people aspire, communities often have the answers, I'd say, from the get-go. And so it's important to begin with community entry, gaining the trust of the community leaders whenever you engage with them, understand their way of life first before coming to prescribe information. And most importantly is that we often forget to close the communication cycle. As doctors, researchers, healthcare workers, we want to understand what's ailing them. We often do not disseminate this information back to them. And that often erodes trust, in that you find that people who come subsequently after you do not get received as well, because they would say, you came, collected information, you left, we didn't know what happened. And so if we close that communication cycle, then we are able to have better future engagements, so that we can be able to frame the situations as a way of life and not as an issue of just getting how many cases do you have, how many people were sick. They're not the victims in all of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doc. I think you even partly answered your second question, which I'll just go ahead and ask on agency. So VL is a neglected tropical disease. When we tell stories about it, how do we avoid framing affected communities as passive victims of both disease and climate change? Where do we locate agency as professionals?
Thank you for that. Yes, so I may have partly talked about it, but I would say that we are looking at communities as change agents, and we are there to help them move the solutions forward. We are not there to prescribe for them solutions from the get-go. This is because Dr. Mohan just said that he comes from that community, he lives there, he understands what actually it means, but often the politics of it frames things that what's best for them, if I can put it that way. So it needs to be, what are you really doing in terms of taking care of the climate? They would know that this area, we are experiencing conflict, for example. And so how we mitigate against this conflict is maybe to move our pasture to this particular area, or this is how we speak to our neighboring communities to understand what is happening. They have their own informal engagements to understand. And so my job would be to document and to amplify their messaging, not necessarily to come and prescribe a notion of which I think will be correct. Because we've had the privilege of having, say, better education, or going to medical school, or going to journalism school, and so you have a bigger lens, does not mean that we are any more knowledgeable than they are. We are accountable to them as a community, and we also need to acknowledge that we don't necessarily know every single part about their way of life. Once we do understand that part, then we're able to assist them going forward.
I love when you say we amplify, not originate our own. Thank you so much, Doc. If anyone has any question for the two doctors who just spoke, please leave your question on the chat. They'll be happy to answer. As I proceed, I would love to ask Eric Achola to unmute for you're about to speak next. So allow me to read Achola's bio. So Eric Achola is a global communications manager at Amrefel Africa, shaping health and climate narratives across more than 35 countries. He works where storytelling meets power, negotiating donor expectations, community truth, and ethical responsibility. Achola brings a practitioner's lens on how to tell impact stories that serve communities first without simplifying sensationalization or separating climate conflicts and health. Achola, welcome. Feel free to unmute and say hi before I ask you your two questions.
Thank you, Faith. Please confirm you can hear me, and hi, everybody.
Hi, Achola, we can hear you.
Thank you. So
I can
back
go
to you,
ahead and
Faith.
ask.
Yeah,
Thank you.
please go ahead.
Let
Thank
me
you.
ask you your two questions. Your first question is, as a communications expert, you've likely been asked to produce impact stories for donors. What is one specific practice you have changed or refused because it would have been unethical? And how did you handle that conversation? Go ahead, Achola.
Yeah, well, thank you, Faith, for that difficult question. Difficult, but very timely. Around, really just thinking of some of the experiences that we've had. And, one practice that I have consciously and deliberately challenged throughout my career is the tendency to frame people through their vulnerability rather than their humanity. And I believe at some point, each of us here in the webinar today has interacted with or maybe seen a picture of some malnourished child or some community that is really depicted in a way that demonstrates vulnerability. But what I've actually come to learn throughout my many years in the industry is that in the development and the global health sectors, there has, of course, been really historical belief that the more dramatic or distressing a story is, then the more likely it is to attract funding or attention. So on occasion, of course, I have received some of those requests to focus heavily on suffering and to find a more shocking image, or maybe they put up the most heartbreaking quote, or have some sort of the most desperate circumstance of a community. And while some of these requests are often well-intentioned, actually not some, most of them are well-intentioned, they can unintentionally strip people of their dignity and reinforce harmful stereotypes about African communities. And there was this one particular case where we had a story opportunity which was centered around community facing significant health and climate-related challenges. And the expectation was to emphasize deprivation as a primary narrative. So I felt a little bit uncomfortable with that approach because it reduced people to recipients of aid rather than recognizing them as individuals with agency, resilience, and solutions of their own. So instead of rejecting that particular request outright, I reframed that particular conversation and I asked, so what if we told the same story through a lens of leadership rather than helplessness? What if we showed not only the challenge, but also how the community was responding? The level of resilience and the little initiatives that they were doing at community level to address some of the issues that they were facing at that time. And what if we actually allowed the people themselves to define their own experience rather than fitting them into a narrative that we had already constructed? So the result was a story that still communicated urgency and need, but also highlighted local innovation and the determination of the people involved. So it was more nuanced, more authentic, and ultimately more powerful to the cause that we were pushing for. So that particular experience for me, it reinforced something that I strongly believe in to date, that our responsibility as communicators is not simply to generate empathy. It is to ensure that we pursue impact that comes not at the expense of the dignity of the people that we serve. So the people whose stories that we seek to tell should leave the processes feeling more respected, they should feel more heard, and they should feel adequately and accurately represented, not just being used as a means to an end. So that's what I would say to that particular question, Faith. Over.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Achola. As your fellow communicator, I like it when you say the more dramatic, the more the attention. And that's one of the things we have to deal with in the age of trending and following the trend of the day. And that brings me to the second question on environmental peacebuilding. Environmental peacebuilding narratives often separate climate, conflict, and health. In your work, interacting and integrating ethical storytelling, where do you find the greatest tension between what makes a good story and what serves the community?
Yeah, well, thank you, Faith, for that question. So for me, the greatest tension lies in the difference between simplicity and truth. So communicators that we are, we are often encouraged to tell stories that are clear, concise, and emotionally compelling. And we look for very strong protagonists, defined challenge, and very clear resolutions. But the problem is that communities do not experience their realities in such neat categories. So when I speak with communities across, because we do a lot of field work, not only in my current portfolio of work, but also reflecting on some of the past responsibilities that I've had. So while interacting with the local communities, they would rarely describe, and I would take climate change, for example, and maybe conflict as well, or health or livelihood. So they would rarely describe some of those as separate issues, So for a pastoralist family, for example, so you go to the Maasai, for example, in Kenya, for a family there, a prolonged drought may lead to resource depletion, which would easily fuel conflict and then also disrupt livelihoods, which in turn affects nutrition. And the nutrition, of course, leads to an impact to health. It affects education. The children are able to go to school, and also affects social cohesion in the long run. So for such kind of a community, these are not separate stories. They are lived experiences that directly affect each and every one of them. So the tension emerges because complexity is usually much harder to communicate than just a simple narrative. So a good story, for example, of course, in communications can, sometimes be one that simplifies reality into a message that our audience can, easily or quickly grasp. But what serves communities is often a story that preserves the context, a story that acknowledges the complexities, and a story that avoids reducing people to a single identity or challenge. So when we look at ethical storytelling, for me, this means resisting the urge to extract the most dramatic element of a situation and present it in isolation. So instead, it would mean that we would have to ask perspectives, which are very important in shaping the narrative. We need to ask ourselves, which are some of the voices that are missing within the narrative that we have? Do we have the full representation of the true picture of the community? Do we have the true voices of our communities represented? And then we also need to check whether the story helps the audience to really understand the root causes rather than merely reacting to some of the symptoms or the causes of the issues that we are looking at. So one of the most important shifts that I have made, and of course this in reference to my career, is moving from telling stories about communities to creating opportunities for communities to tell their own story. So when people define really what matters to them, and I think Dr. Kibati mentioned this in his submission, the narrative is often much richer and more nuanced and more reflective of reality, rather than anything that we could have scripted ourselves. So ultimately, I believe that our role as communicators, those of us who are in the industry, is not to simplify communities for our audiences. Our role is to help our audiences understand communities more fully. So the best stories are not necessarily the most dramatic, they are the most truthful. And when communities recognize themselves in the stories we tell, we know that we have done our job perfectly well. Thank you, Faith. Over.
Thank you so much, Achola. I like when you say that we have to let communities see themselves in their stories and also simplify and sanctify. One of our designers keeps reminding us that the best designs we have to do are the simple ones that have been sanctified. Thank you so much, Achola. If you have a question for Achola and the other speakers who spoke before him, please go ahead and type on the chat. And now I am going to introduce one of the best storytellers we have in the continent of Africa. Agnes, I hope you're close and about to unmute as I give your introduction. I hope I did this introduction justice because honestly, you're one of the best we have when it comes to ethical and impact storytelling in this continent. So Agnes Penda is a broadcast journalist with BBC Africa, reporting from spaces where climate stress, conflict, and human survival collide. Her work confronts the ethical tension between newsroom urgency and community dignity. Agnes brings hard-earned insight into how journalists decide what not to show and why restraint can be as powerful as visibility in environmental peace building. Welcome, Penda. You can unmute and say hi as I ask you your two questions.
Hi.
Hi, Agnes. How are you?
I'm wondering who you're talking about, but hi.
So, are you ready for your two questions?
Yes, please.
Awesome. I'll ask question number one. You have reported from conflict-prone territories where climate and violence intersect. What is one story you chose not to publish or broadcast, and what ethical consideration led to that decision? You can go ahead, Agnes.
There've been plenty of stories over the years. I've forgotten some of them, but as the doctors were speaking, a scenario came to mind. There was a young boy of around 12 years who was being brought from Wajir to Nairobi. He was being flown to the city for treatment. He had a very scary and strange skin disease, and everybody was scrambling to film. The boy was clearly traumatized because the cameras were in his face and everybody's running towards getting the best shot. And so it's just a scenario that came to my mind that yeah, sometimes we run for the story, and yeah, we ran that story. We had it. There's a story that we had some time back in Uganda. We're filming this lady. It was a maternal health story who has had multiple births over the years. She's 44 years. She's 40 years now, but she has more than 40 kids. She has given birth to more than 40 in multiples every year. So I came back with this story from Uganda, and I was excited. Like, I spoke to her, we had a good interview, but then now the ethical consideration came in that this lady had actually been raped, when she was younger. That's how she started getting babies early. She got raped at the age of 12. She got her children at that time, the age of 13. So she was underage when she started getting into these relationships with men. So what really happened was, like, is it fair to air her story? And how it started was so wrong. Like, are we not giving this thing a voice? So that is how we killed the story. I have a hard drive with very good footage of her with her children, and I know I cannot do anything about it. It was flagged immediately. Like, how did she start getting children? This is what happened to her. She got raped at the age of 12, or definitely, okay, it was early marriage, but it is rape. A 12-year-old getting married, that is rape. So that is what happened to her. And ethically, everything went wrong about that story. I have not aired it. I've seen it all over the place, but I understood why it was flagged at that time. So sometimes we've had to kill stories. Sometimes we've had to not air a story, like all of it, depending on what's happening in the field. When we were filming the boy with the issue of the skin, I was in a whole different media house. It was very different there. It was a matter of bring me the story to the desk, like right now. So it depends on where you are and what structures are in place to ensure that we do not take advantage of the people that are giving us an opportunity to get into their lives and to tell their stories. So remember last year when we went to Kwale, I think I met Dr. Muhanje there, and we were filming the men who had lymphatic filariasis. And I was like, okay, so how do we film these men without making them feel like, you know, you see, it's a condition that is visible, and it can be very embarrassing. So there are some ethical things to consider while we are filming. Sometimes we go to film a story, the person is uncomfortable, clearly. So even if they have consented, they say, okay, I want to have this story, but you can sense in their voice that they are scared when it comes out. There's a lady in December, we filmed in Narok County, a girl who had gone through female genital mutilation. She did not, she consented to be seen, but clearly she was scared that she's going to be, her father is going to see her, but she's like, oh, okay, but I'll, so definitely we did not do the story. We killed that particular interview, but we interviewed others who were at least 18 and above, and you could see that they don't have the trauma anymore. Because sometimes you can speak to somebody who is still carrying trauma of what happened, and you're taking advantage of that, or you see you're running after the person because they are crying and you want the tears, like the doctor was saying. Sometimes you just want the hearts, the crazy stuff to show and all that. And it's not always the case. It's not always about how pity or pity party a story is for it to be. Yeah. So I would say it's about yourself as a journalist, a storyteller, and putting yourself in the people's shoes, like their dignity as well. There are people like you, there are people like me, and how do you put their needs first? Yeah. So that is what I will say about that.
Thank you so much, Agnes. I have seen you wrestle with that as we've collaborated, and I can attest to that. And this brings me to your second question. Newsrooms reward speed and drama. Environmental peace building stories are often slow and complex, and sometimes they die. So, how do you navigate institutional pressure for sensational narratives while honoring the dignity and complexity of communities living with environmental stress?
Yeah, so sometimes you go and do your nice piece, nice story, you come back with it, and there's no, there's no what can I say? There's no space. There's no space in the bulletin for you. So we've come up with ways, like when you are doing a desk, like what I work mainly on features. Most of the time, it's my passion to do features and to work with the people. So sometimes you go to the field, you've done a good story, you've come back with it, and there is no space for it. So here, there's something called peg. You can peg a story to a day. Yeah, we can have World Environment Day on the 5th. Nobody is going to kill that. Okay, at least where I work, I know that when I peg it to a particular day, a UN day, they will say, okay, we can have that because you peg it to a particular event. Sometimes, for example, if a disaster, something has happened, you can also peg your story on climate change on that particular event that has to do with climate change or has to do with the people. For example, there was the Chitezi dump site that collapsed on people in Kampala, Uganda, I think 2 years ago. So I went to Kampala to film on how the people, what was happening with the people, the environment, because they had dumped in that place for so many years, and it collapsed on the people, killed a lot of people. So we were looking at, so what is next? What are the solutions for this urban city for the sake of trash and all that? So we got a peg on running that story because we got it close to an event that had actually happened. So when there's something that has happened and then you do a story as a follow-up, as a feature follow-up, it's also likely to go on air. Another way is that there are many avenues nowadays of running your stories. If someone says your story will not make it to number one, number two, there's online, there's digital. Just ensure you have visibility. Take your stories out there yourself. Once they run on the TV or the radio, cut something, run it on social, it will definitely get an audience. So nowadays, we're not just relying on what we see on TV. There are a lot other ways of telling our stories. You can do a small piece to camera and explain a story, put just even one shot or one up sound or the interviews that you have done, just cut a short piece, put it out there. Of course, after they have run in the bulletin or something, or if it has been rejected, you can cut a piece and put it on your social, on YouTube, on wherever, and it will definitely get an audience if it is true. So we have done that before. Then we realized that the larger organizations saw that the story was doing well, and they were like, "You didn't give us this story," and we're like, "I did, but you shut it down." And that's how I ended up having my stories back on air. So another way is to be as creative as you can, as creative as possible, and speak up. When you're in the newsroom, you really have to speak for what you stand for. You have to lobby. We lobby, we pitch in the best way possible. We lobby, we sit in the meetings and we say this story is important as well. So give it a voice, speak. And then we're doing the stories also, give them the people's voice. Let it just not be just a story. Let it speak to the people. Let it have the people's voices. Just film it well if it's filming, because I think I know about filming more than other forms of journalism. Film it as well as possible. Write a good script. Definitely somebody will see it somewhere and say they want it. Sometimes they can neglect a story, then they find it, somebody else has used it, and everybody is after that particular story. So you pick stories or news events, make them relatable to the people, make them as creative as possible, you see. So those are just some of the things that we can do. But if there's a journalist here who has something more that they can say on that, please add. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Penda. I told you guys she's the best. I was not wrong. If you have a question for Penda, please go ahead and type it on the chat. I'll make sure to ask. I can see someone is very active in looking for you, Penda. I'm just going to make sure that you ask each other questions. So allow me to put. All right, all right.
Thank you.
And she's clapping. Allow me to proceed to Eliza. Eliza is a member of a community that I am very passionate about, and I'll not give spoilers about it. So let me just give her introduction as Eliza, you unmute and say hi. So Eliza Arwin is the head of research at the Center on Conflict Development Peacebuilding in Geneva. She works at the boundary between research, policy, and practice, asking whose knowledge is legitimized and whose is filtered out. Eliza will reflect on how communities of practice like ECCP and CCDP can move ethical storytelling from intention into collective responsibility. Welcome, Eliza. Unmute and say hi before I ask you your two questions.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. You guys can hear me? Perfect. It's wonderful to be
Absolutely.
here,
Yeah.
and it's both an honor and a challenge to speak after so many wonderful stories have been told. But thank you so much for inviting me, Faith.
Awesome, Eliza. So I'm just going to ask you your two questions. Question one, the ECCP connects over 1,300 people across 400 organizations. That is a lot of storytelling happening in parallel. What is one way the ECCP currently practices ethical storytelling collectively, and what is one gap you are still trying to address? Also, you can tell us what ECCP stands for while you're at it. Welcome.
Thank you so much. So indeed, I mean, I'm speaking today in a very specific capacity, and which, by the way, is kind of replacing somebody who really should be here speaking, which is Annika Eriksson Pearson, who is the facilitator of our community of practice and is like the node around which everything sort of functions. So the ECCP is a community of practice on environment, climate, conflict, and peace. And as Faith just mentioned, it's over 1,300 individuals, over 400 organizations. There's governments, IGOs, NGOs, activists, artists. It's an extraordinary community. I will put the link in the chat in case anybody wants to come join our community who isn't already a part of it. I'm speaking today because my little research center here in Geneva is one of the co-hosts along with MPACs of the ECCP. We're an institutional home for it. But the wonderful thing that means is that I get to hear so many of the stories and I get to sort of be a part of it. And so I'm sort of, Annika is in some time zone for which this call was taking place at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And so she kindly asked me to step in, and it's with great pleasure that I do so today. So I was actually going to ask you, Faith, if it's okay to ask the second question at the same time, and I'm going to answer everything at once because they're very linked, and my answers ended up being very linked as well. Is that okay?
Absolutely. I'm going to shoot it right about now. Communities of practice can unintentionally amplify certain voices, global north, English speaking, academic, while marginalizing others. How does ECCP's approach to ethical storytelling specifically try to counter that tendency?
Thank you. And thank you for really such thoughtful and important questions. So there's a few things. I mean, obviously, I spoke with Annika also before, and so some of what I'm answering today also reflects her thoughts and feelings about this. So I'll start with one of the first things she said, which I think is the most important, which is that we put relationships first. So the ECCP is first and foremost a community, and it's first about building relationships. And 1,300 people, several hundred organizations, we hear so many wonderful stories. And it's very sort of tempting to take these stories and to treat them as content, as communications material, as examples to circulate, and so on. But what we try and do is to create spaces where stories are emerging first through relationships. So what the community does is meet online. We have WhatsApp groups, we have monthly regular meetings, we have local, regional hubs with regional ECCP subgroups and info and just in-person meetups, not just the regional hubs, but we'll have like a Nairobi meetup or a Bogota meetup. And these are trust building spaces where people can get to know each other first, build relationships with each other first. And before asking to each other to produce knowledge. And it means a number of different things, but amongst other things, we're not trying to sort of force one official story of environmental peace building or what any of these concepts really mean. It's about people getting to know each other and stories emerging in a slightly more organic setting. It also allows us to have some of these categories because not all of what we do is going to be branded by us, and I think the stories today are perfect examples as the same things that sort of like donor language or other things is environmental peace building or conflict, peace, and security or whatever else it's getting branded as. So yeah, the community is really this sort of container for exchange. It's a place where people can meet up and talk with each other and say, this is what the work that I'm doing looks like in my context, regardless of sort of what donor category, academic concept, et cetera, communications template. So we've had to one of the stories that I wanted to tell today, and I'm very excited to see that Amanda Woomer is on this call too, who is not only a member of the ECCP as well, but in fact one of our chief storytellers. And so we were sort of put a little bit to the test because we were given some funds to produce sort of a micro grant inside of the ECCP, basically to provide a small micro grant to community members to do work that they felt was relevant in their community related to these themes. And so one of the things we struggled with was, okay, so how do we get these stories in a way that is not extractive, that meets people's needs for storytelling on their terms? Because reporting is complicated for for a great number of reasons. And so what we experimented with was reporting on anyone's terms. So feedback on what happened with the microgrant came back in the context of a story told how you wanted. You could send a voice memo on WhatsApp. You could send a video. You could send written word. You could do a contemporary dance for all we cared. We just wanted to hear the story how you wanted to tell it through whatever medium you wanted to tell, and importantly in any language. So that's one of the gaps that we wanted to address, that Annika specifically wanted to address as well. It's an issue. We work really hard to attempt to overcome that issue. We have lots of groups in other languages, like the WhatsApp groups are divided. We try to be as linguistically accessible as possible, but a lot of things default to English, or French or Spanish, if not English. So, it extends reach. French and Spanish are still colonial languages, right? So we haven't really found our multilingual stride yet. Translation is still, we work really hard to try and get it as broadly accessible as possible, but it's still occasional rather than like embedded. And so that's still an issue that we're trying to address. And I wanted to say, if anybody is going to respond to any questions with regards to my intervention today, we are always open to hearing any recommendations that people have or any thoughts that people might have on this particular issue. Because as much as we want multilingual participation to feel, normal and accessible, and it's complicated to do it in all the languages that our 1,300 members speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eliza. I am so happy to see we have so many ECCP members, and I'm encouraging all of us to join. It is a community where most of us have found our voice, and we count on each other. So please join. And those of you who are Kenyans, please join us. We have a Kenyan chapter as well within the WhatsApp group. So thank you so much. Finally, I am going to introduce our last speaker, who was the first one, and he had complained about time, and I'm about to do a number on him. So, Larry, I'm sorry. So, back to you. But first of all, let me do a proper introduction for you. So, Professor Larry is a leading scholar of environmental peacebuilding. He is a professor emeritus at the University of Waterloo and one of the editors of the forthcoming Essential Concepts of Environmental Peacebuilding, A to Z Guide. His work asks a fundamental question: in dealing with socio-ecological challenges, whose values matter most? Larry closes the speaker's reflections by connecting ethical storytelling to knowledge production, power, and whose voices shape the ideas that guide policy. Welcome, Larry, and I'm going to ask both of your questions so that you answer them together. So, question one: an A to Z guide of essential concepts implies defining terms. Who decides what is essential? How does your book handle the risk that defining concepts from a distance could itself be an act of narrative power that excludes last mile voices? And secondly, you are tying everything together at the end of this session. If ethical and impact storytelling were treated as seriously as concepts like conflict sensitivity or do no harm in environmental peace building, what will change in how the next edition of your book is written or who is invited to contribute? There you go. The
Yeah,
floor is yours.
thanks. Thank you, Faith. I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. All right. So, wow, that there was some really great stuff that preceded me here, and when you say that I'm going to close the speaker's reflections by connecting ethical storytelling to knowledge production power and whose voices shape the ideas, certain things jumped out at me. So, for Dr. Kibat, he's talking about documenting and amplifying. Doctors and teachers, we hold a particular, for some reason, we have are highly respected in society, and I think we have a kind of a power that must be used wisely. Eric Achola talking about we, I mean, being in development practice, I know this all the time. You use alarming images to get attention, but then you essentialize people that reduce them to sort of harmful stereotypes. And so somehow, we have to navigate this. You have to get the messages out, but how do you not? But then once out, how do you control, you don't control the interpretation that comes through there. I liked Annika and Eliza's put relationships first. I feel like stories create connections. They're ways of building broad coalitions across artificial difference, place, language, ethnicity. So by having certain kinds of platforms and fora, we can come together and share and know that we are not so different, despite what we might look like on the face, for example. If I can just spend a couple of minutes on specific questions. In your first question about what is essential and how do you handle the risk and so on, as the saying goes, no risk, no reward, right? So we wanted to start somewhere, and we wanted to call it a glossary, not the glossary or the essential, but like it's one of many that could go in many different ways. So it's not meant to be definitive, but it's a starting point, a living document, so to speak. And we know language matters, and how we often, when you do conflict resolution, for example, you talk about effective communication. How do you, and active listening. So somehow we wanted to get, just put something out there as a point of departure. And the initial idea was for the glossary was workshopped among willing members of environmental peace building at the conference in The Hague. And so in a way, these are curated, but they were also crowdsourced. So we ended up with more than almost 230 contributors, and we really put an emphasis on getting younger people, different people working in different ways around the world, different walks of life, and so on. So we know it's not perfect, but we tried to, we wanted it to be an entry point into a conversation. And given that our community of interest or community of practice shares values, And we've heard those values through this hour, but we also navigate very difficult and contentious spaces that are populated by groups, myriad groups and individuals, different philosophies and approaches to managing resources and the environment. We felt it was very important to take a position, lest you leave the field to be defined by those we hope ourselves to steer in a different and more inclusive direction. So that's not a perfect answer, but I hope it helps you understand how we want this to be part of a conversation, an entry point, an opening, which leads to your second question about the how if we took ethical and impact storytelling seriously, how would it change the next edition? Well, I would, again, to use an aphorism, words matter. Right. And without doubt, media matters. And it's great to see, a BBC person here, how the message is assembled and disseminated. That really matters. In what form, in what language. And so we hope that the glossary grows and changes with time. It acts as a point of departure, as I've said, not an end point, not an endpoint in conversations regarding the ways and means of achieving, let's say, inclusive, just, and sustainable socio-ecological outcomes at all scales. That's a big academic. Already, I've used words that probably marginalize some people, but you get my point. It's up to we want to put this out in open access to the public, to our community of practice, and have it disseminated broadly, where this event, right, which is but one in a series of events, is the invitation to participate among everybody, to be involved, to be visible, and to be heard, and to carry the conversation forward, and to maybe have the next edition. It might be alternatives to the first edition. It could be whatever it wants. It has to grow, evolve, and rather than be this kind of rote box of things, concepts, where we're supposed to always accept that this is the truth, have it to be much more organic and let it reflect the lived realities where and when they exist. And I really feel like we are in privileged positions, so that we must ask whose values matter most. What if we put the poor first, for example, and started from a position of sort of assets rather than vulnerabilities? Oftentimes we frame people most negatively impacted by environmental change or conflict as always vulnerable and incapable, but rather they often have assets and creative and so on. So I feel like I'm probably speaking to the converted. I think if you're on this call, you probably agree with much of what I said. So onward and upward.
Thank you so much, Prof. The book is not out yet, and I am one of the contributors. I'm so happy to share. So we will let everyone know as soon as the book is out. We will share with all of you. I have your emails. I hope you allow me. I know we have missed the hour mark by 3 minutes, but if anyone has a burning question, you can ask about now, and I understand anyone who has to drop off. But you can stay for 2 minutes if anyone has a burning question to the speakers who are here. Going once? Anyone with a burning question? Going twice?
Hey, I did put my question on the message. There are several
Yes,
questions
Regina,
on
go
the
ahead
chat.
and ask your question to Agnes. She's here before she leaves.
Now I don't even remember, but it was about
Can I
ethical
read it for you?
considerations. Yes,
Let me
please
read
do.
it for you. Yeah. Regina Mutiru is asking, great hearing from Agnes. What I have heard is that depending with which structures you are working with, ethics may or may not be considered. What happens to you as a professional who wants to be ethical? Did I get it right?
Yes, and structures in this case, meaning maybe a media house or something like that.
I think
Awesome.
so. I
Yeah.
think by structures I meant, maybe it didn't come out well. I meant like depending on where you are, where you work, because sometimes you can work in a place where not everybody is aligned like that or maybe has the same training that you have, or someone is so used to hard-hitting news stories. It's all about how we can get the story fast, how we can do, So sometimes it takes you as a journalist yourself to say, no, this is not how you can, this is wrong. You can also correct someone, maybe if it's a place whereby some things are not considered, but you know that is how they're supposed to be. You can correct and say, can we do this a little bit different? Because ethically, this is how it's supposed to be, or this is correct, this is incorrect. That you can always speak, because we are all learning. Even an editor can be learning. Yeah. I don't know if that is clear though.
Regina?
Yes, that helps. Thank you.
Awesome. Munini, are you still here? I can see there's a question. You have a question, and I would love for you to ask if you're still here. Going once. Munini?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. And really nice to see my colleagues, Eric and the ECCP team. I wanted to ask, how do the speakers take care of their mental health, seeing that some of the stories they handle are quite distressing, like what the doctor was sharing and what Agnes was sharing, and also what Eric was sharing. And then also, as people who are in positions of privilege, how do you handle that so that it's not influencing your work? Thank you so much.
Thanks, Munini. Any speaker willing to take that? Please unmute and share. I'm about to nominate someone. Achola, how do you stay okay? Go ahead, Achola.
I was actually just about, I'd suspected you'd nominate me, and I wanted to say no, so that we get to hear from the doctor's perspectives, and maybe Agnes could share her story. Well, so, but just to mention something briefly, there's that whole component of self-awareness, and of course the need to protect ourselves from compassion fatigue by creating space to process difficult stories and seeking support when needed. So for me, the question that I always ask myself is that, am I telling the story or am I like listening deeply enough to understand the story the community wants to tell? And really, what are some of the issues at play here? So for me, I think it's usually just about moderation and really looking at how do we balance, because there's the whole emotional burden. We are human beings, and there is a tendency, and there's a high chance that you'd most likely get affected by some of the stories. So of course, looking at some of the guidelines that we have, but also at a personal level, looking at moderation and trying to create some sort of a balance, that how deep can I go with this particular story? And then of course, if there are moments when I feel that I'm not able to handle it, I usually delegate and get myself off that space. So personally, I don't have a Bible level reference for this, but I treat it on case-to-case basis. But the bottom line is, I prioritize my mental health. I ask myself, how far can I go in this? If it's something I can handle, I go deep within and do it. Of course, still looking at the ethical considerations, but again, if it's something that I can't handle emotionally, I would not and delegate. But also, as I mentioned at the beginning, that if need be, I seek care. If I need to talk to somebody, I go and seek help just for the sake of my sanity. So that's what I would do, but really would love to hear from the doctors and from Penda's point of view, because they deal with these issues on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thanks, Achola. I'll go to the last mile first. Dr. Mrife, I don't know if he's still here. Are you still here? Probably not, because he was still working. If he's
Yes,
not,
I'm still here.
oh, awesome. Please take it. I know you're working in some very hard, tempting conditions. Please let us know how you deal with how you take care of your mental health.
Thank you, Faith. Actually, mental health is one of the very important topics that people need to talk about. Surprisingly, most of us, or many people, think that doctors are immune to this kind of challenges. Okay, not just doctors, but everyone in general, but doctors are not an exception. So I think there are a few ways that we try to manage this kind of scenario. One way is there's something called, how do I put it? When you're faced with such challenges, there's one principle that usually helps most of us, and it's actually trying to do the best with what you have at that time that you are faced with that challenge. So when you apply that in whichever challenge that you have, at the end of the day, you'll have room in your mind to tell yourself that I tried my best regardless of the outcome. That is one way. Another way is some people use this concept called compartmentalization. I mean, it may not be very popular, but it's useful in some circumstances because you'll have to separate these challenges from your life, from your daily life, from your family. You do not have to take them home every day. You'll have to learn how to put them where they belong. If it's work related, then you put them at work. When you come back tomorrow, there's a good chance that you might remember or see or encounter them all over again. But when you put them in a compartment, in quotes, just put them where they need to be, lock them up, go home, interact with your family like a normal person. It's not as easy as it sounds, but it's a strategy that people apply. The other one is basically socially, you need to belong, even if it's some certain religion or something. It's really useful in many scenarios. Like you need to belong to somewhere. I mean, you need to have a belief in something, at least believe in yourself that you're doing good, the least we could say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. Kibati, are you still here? And you're going to close this session for us if you're here.
Yes, I'm still here.
Awesome. So close it up for us nicely. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith. So, not to belabor what everybody else has said, because that is all very important. It's important for one to know themselves first. And seeking help is not a sign of weakness in case you feel like something in your workplace or in interaction is having a heavy mental toll on yourself. Personally, just like Jasper said, a sense of community is very important. Friendships, laughter, day-to-day activities, and those often do have a kind of a release in that you're able to somewhat detach from the mental load and the heaviness that you do carry and the sense of responsibility that is expected of you from day-to-day work. Luckily, in some of the spaces we work, we feel safe to be able to share with colleagues, supervisors, and this does really help in moving some of these things forward and feeling that you're working for the greater good. And so I think my colleagues have been the best sense of mental health relief that I've had working over the years. I've been fortunate in that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc, and I am so happy to call you my colleague. The feeling is mutual. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. If you have any question, I've pasted my email on the chat. Feel free to reach out. If you want to reach any speaker individually, I'll ask for their consent and I can connect you both. So feel free to reach out on that front as well. Write to me and I'll connect you to them if you have a question or you want to follow up on something. I have loved moderating this session for all of you. Eva, are you in a position to unmute and say bye with me?
Yes, of course.
Say hi to everyone, please.
Hi. So great that you're all here. Thank you so much for joining and staying until the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming. You can unmute, say